It's that time of year again, where our immunity is really being tested. I have to feel 100% in order to run my weekly podcast, fulfill deliverables for my clients and partners, manage my household, and take care of my family of 5. So believe me, I take my health seriously and take all the measures I can to feel my best. Sambucol was developed by a virologist and is a dietary supplement that provides powerful immune support fueled by nature's superfruit, black elderberry. Black elderberries are a natural source of vitamin A, C, and E, and contain antioxidants that may help fight free radicals. The gummies and syrup have a delicious berry flavor and are easy to incorporate into my daily wellness routine. They're dairy, egg, gluten, nut, soy, and wheat-free, vegan and vegetarian friendly, and they do not have any artificial colors, flavors, or sweeteners. Visit sambucolusa.com, and that's spelled SAMBUCOL USA.com, and use my code MOMSENSE15 to receive 15% off your order of $9.99 or more. This offer is valid for U.S. customers only. Sometimes parents need a little reminder that our health comes first, and Sambucol can help.
When you think about your dog, like your dog is out there just eating everything off the street, right?
Yes.
And you notice that they're still alive, but they're licking everything. They have high levels of hydrochloric acid in their stomach. Human beings used to have more hydrochloric acid in their stomach. Our gut microbiome, which is a fancy word for all the little critters in our gut, we have 90% less of them than people did just 100 years ago. That means we are dealing with 10% of the critters we are supposed to have in our gut. What does that mean? Physical and mental illness of all kinds. So our guts just don't have what it takes to not only digest our food, but to fight off these infections.
Hi there, it's Kanika. Get ready for another season of That's Total Mom Sense, where I interview global thought leaders on their life stories, the legacy they're passing on to their kids, and of course, their mom sense and dad sense superpower.
It's me, Bobby Brown. Can't wait to share my story.
Hey, I'm Daphne Oz.
Hi, I'm Shani Darden.
Hi, this is Christelle Lynn.
Hi, I'm Bhavna Shammulan.
Hi, this is Tony Leroy.
Hi, I'm Shannon Lee.
Hi, I'm Farnoosh Tarabi.
Hi, this is Michael Perry, founder of Maple, and you're listening to me on That's Total Mom Sense.
It's our mission to be inclusive, so we're having dads pull up a seat at the table. Tune in to my new monthly segment, What Matters Most with Maple, featuring my co-host, Michael Perry, tech founder and devoted father of 2. Thank you to my brand partners, community, and you, yes, you, for making this podcast possible. Episodes release every Thursday. Join my tribe by logging on to thatstotalmomsense.com and subscribe wherever you listen so you never miss an episode. There's something to be said about knowing how to age gracefully and understanding what the key components are to longevity. It's not nips and tucks and Botox. It's far deeper than that and a hell of a lot simpler and cheaper. Today's guest is Julia Loggins, who is a health and wellness industry icon. Born in LA, Julia is a true survivor, overcoming debilitating illness throughout her childhood and teens. Hospitalized frequently for life-threatening asthma, she's also endured crippling arthritis, migraines, bleeding ulcers, and colitis. Thanks to the principles of the Bragg Healthy Lifestyle and radical detoxification, Julia completely healed her mind and body. With the determination to help herself and others, she studied holistic medicine. She learned all she could about regenerative medicine and set out to inspire people on how to live their best, healthy, and most authentic lives. She completed her health educator's course at the Hippocrates Health Institute in 1982 and studied with psychiatrist Dr. Ernest Pecci, whose work is now being carried out at the Hoffman Institute in Northern California. With over 35 years of experience in health and wellness, Julia began her private practice in Santa Barbara in 1983, specializing in digestive health. She is an internationally certified colon hydrotherapist with a specialty in regenerative nutrition and fertility health. She wrote her first book, The Unimaginable Life, with her former husband, Kenny Loggins, of Footloose fame. As her practice grew, she wrote and published her second and third books, Dare to Detoxify and It Takes Guts to Be Happy, a 21-day plan to heal your belly and recharge your life. Along with her empowering self-help books, Julia has designed her own signature line of digestive health supplements and online courses. She's a mother of 2 grown children and resides in Santa Barbara with her now husband, Paul Turner. Julia, thank you so much for joining me on That's Total Mom Sense.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you. Being a mom is my favorite thing. So it's exciting to be on a parenting show.
Yes. And we're going to dive into all the things. So I'm so excited. Well, let's start from, your career and the imprint that you've made on the health and wellness industry. What led you down that path?
So saving my own life led me down this path. I spent most of my 17 years in and out of hospitals with life-threatening illnesses from environmental sensitivities, asthma, allergies, rheumatoid arthritis, bleeding ulcers, you name it. I was sent to drug experimentation programs all over the country. Will be 67 in March. So this was in the 60s. And so in those days, which unfortunately is still continuing to this day, drugs were what was used to treat people who had chronic and acute illnesses. By the time I got to be 17, doctors told my parents I wouldn't live through the year. My organs were failing. I was having anaphylactic allergy attacks on a regular basis. And, being a mom, you know how scary those are. And so, along with that, just more and more drugs. And I was lucky and blessed to finally meet a medical doctor who was mentored by Paul Bragg in the understandings of natural health and healing. And he told me that what we needed to do, he told my parents that we needed to shift everything to get me off all of the drugs and to do a whole natural diet that had no sugar, wheat, dairy, preservatives. I mean, this is revolutionary, radical in the 60s. My parents said, no drugs, she'll die. And he said, that's what's killing her. So
my goodness.
That was the beginning of my being able to turn this around. And also, I had had 3 near-death experiences and a lifetime of illnesses. So the beginning of turning my health around, and then that was the launch of my journey. And that led me to my studies. It led me to healing my own body completely head to toe. That led me into my healing path and to my almost 40-year practice, and then my books.
So, as you were navigating your own health challenges, was there, a person you met or a philosophy that you adopted that you felt like, okay, this is going to steer me in more of a natural and holistic path? Because, traditional medicine isn't that.
Right. Exactly. I mean, I definitely knew that what was happening wasn't working. I was just dancing on my grave. So, I was a kid, I was a teenager, I was very spiritually inclined. So I was, and I really wasn't living in my body. My body was in pain all the time. So I really had a strong spiritual connection to just the world outside of me. And I feel like that really sustained me. It's not like I had any strong sense that I knew for sure I would make it. When I met my doctor, Dr. Pottinger, he had a strong sense that I would make it. And I feel like that was my launching pad to believing that it could happen. After that, it was just one step after another into learning, basically how to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And then what caused that, what really was the source of why I was as ill as I was, and then what I could help others to do to put their bodies and minds and spirits back again. I'm also a trauma and sexual abuse survivor. So there's also, whenever we're dealing with massive illnesses, we're always dealing with trauma.
So how did you, take those next steps And what did you do to kind of build yourself back up together? Because you had so many different ailments along the way. What did you tackle first?
Well, the very first thing was, kind of figuring out what I'd become a universal reactor when their immune system is completely broken down, as mine was. I was just reacting to everything environmental and to every food. So for a couple of years, there were only 5 foods that I could really tolerate because my immune system had just become so incredibly reactive. It was just everything that went in, I was reacting to. So it was a very slow build. And I feel like it was also just about kind of wrapping myself around the sense of what might work in my body and reading everything and really understanding as I moved along that detoxification was going to be key for me, because what had made me ill and what was keeping me ill were the toxins in my body that were caused from all the medications. And then, of course, not just the medications, but just, the chemicals that were in foods, the air, the water. So I became, I was forced to become an expert on what's going on in our environment. I was the canary in the coal mine. Now, of course, we are all the canaries in the coal mine. And we come in contact with 2,500 chemicals a day, and our bodies were not designed to assimilate or eliminate those. So, what happened to me and to my body was just a microcosm of what we're dealing with. I mean, I had no idea that spirit was preparing me for the path that I was launched on. But of course, we don't really know always when something happens, why it's happening.
And so would you say that the root cause of so many of the ailments was your gut?
For sure. It always starts in the gut. Health and healing starts there, just like illness starts there. And that's, why I focus my work on healing the gut. When I started doing that, like I said, almost 40 years ago, there was no understanding in the mainstream, barely in the alternative community, about the importance of the gut. Of course, there was no science on the connection between the gut and the brain. I was seeing it in my own practice. I'd experienced it myself. I was definitely seeing it in my practice, but it would be decades and years before we would learn the science behind that.
And so how do you undo, in your case, damage that was done over years? And, for those of us who, may not have had sickness, we still don't necessarily have the best gut health. So
That's right.
How do you cleanse from the inside out?
Yeah. Even people that are strong don't necessarily have great gut health. And they may actually not know that some of the things they're dealing with, whether it's chronic pain, whether it's headaches, whether it's depression, is actually all started in the gut. Yeah. And, as we know, over 90% of the serotonin, that is the neurotransmitter that makes us feel happy, is made in the gut. 80% of the immune system resides in the gut. So our mood depends on our gut health, and our immunity depends on our gut health. One of the things that I teach people to do is to learn how to safely fast and do, detoxification that, can include liquid nourishment. It's, whether people are fasting on vegetable juices or smoothies, protein smoothies or bone broth. There's a variety of things, but digestion takes more energy than running a 5K. So, doing a 24-hour, 48-hour cleanse is a wonderful thing to do. And I teach people to do it, no matter at what level of cleansing or they're in, or what level of illness that they're dealing with. And some people jump right in, but I created something called fasting light, which is really liquid nourishment days. So that, whether people are dealing with blood sugar issues or they're super busy moms and they've got a million things to do and they don't have time to handle a lot of detox symptoms, or do the detox protocols that I teach in my book, which are really key for, after all, if we're going to start moving these toxins around, we've got to flush them out. I believe that all the things that I teach that I began teaching to people in extreme health situations. Probably within the first decade of my practice, I was teaching them to well people who just wanted to stay well, or they were dealing with things that weren't life-threatening, but they weren't feeling optimal. They didn't have fabulous energy, or they just thought, well, maybe I'm getting old. It's like, and they were 50 or 60 years old, or they were just thinking, I'm a mom, I'm exhausted, because there's a million things going on. But actually, there were really things that we could do that were really simple. And I wanted to create, that's why I started writing books. I wanted to create really simple, accessible tools that a busy mom could pick up and start doing a few of them and feel really different.
How do we rebuild our gut? Can you give us a few tips or foods that you think are, now we all know about superfoods that are integral to that?
Yeah. Well, the first thing, is fermented foods are great. That's a great thing to do. But if people have a lot of gas and bloating and indigestion, that may be too difficult for them to handle right away. And then they may think, okay, this just doesn't work for me. I work with that a lot, that, one of the great things to do is for people to start taking a digestive food enzyme when they eat, because research shows that 80% of adults over 40 are not making digestive enzymes. I see a lot of teenagers in my practice. I would say hardly anyone over the age of 12 has digestive enzymes in their stomach.
Wow.
That's due to stress. That's stress related. And we're all dealing with a lot of stress, whether we're kids or adults, the world that we're around is stressful. So we really need to prepare and care for ourselves. So digestive enzymes are just a lifesaver, and they're super simple. It's like, I think of them as little Pac-Men, they're duplicating what our bodies are supposed to make, but they're not. So they're helping us assimilate our own food. And if we're not assimilating it, it turns to gas, bloat, our blood sugar crashes, so our energy and our mood goes. Some people think that if they're it's normal to be exhausted after they eat. Or, I have a client the other day and I said, do you have headaches? And he's like, no, only after I eat. That's normal. That's his normal.
Right.
So that is a gut issue. That means food isn't digesting. And so digestive enzymes are a simple fix. For some people, a teaspoon of apple cider vinegar and water is a good way to acidify the stomach before, but that doesn't work for everyone. And that's why I like to share a whole variety of tools, because there's no one thing that's going to work for everyone, just like there's no one lifestyle or diet that works for everyone. And so I work with people who embrace all types of eating, whether it's vegetarian or paleo or keto. It's really about whether that suits your body and your blood type, whether it suits your lifestyle, and whether it's working for your body or not.
Yes, that's brilliant. And do you do a full body workup and look at a blood panel to determine?
Absolutely. Yeah, we do. I like to see it all. Especially I work with two incredible doctors here at my clinic. So, we're a team, but I have to say, the first 30 years I practiced was pretty much on my own, although I've been in medical clinics and I partnered with some incredible medical doctors. And I partnered with a Chinese medical doctor who was both a Western medical doctor and an Eastern medical doctor. We worked together for 10 years. And that was an extraordinary experience. For him, Chinese medicine wasn't focused so much on gut health or colon hydrotherapy or colon cleansing. And so that was something new for him, which he fully embraced. For me, getting to integrate Eastern herbs and, into what I was doing was wonderful. But, digestive enzymes, food combining can be really key as well for people with digestive issues. And, we can talk about that if you want, but there's a few simple things that can really help.
Well, I want to get into fasting because I feel like intermittent fasting has become all the rage. And, what are your thoughts on that? And you have a cleanse that helps you through a fast. So
yes, exactly. And intermittent fasting, which means for anybody out there who isn't quite sure of what it means not eating any solid food after your evening meal, which is generally, say, 6 to 7 o'clock, not later than that, and then not eating anything solid again until the next day around noon. I've been an intermittent faster for about 20 years, and many of my clients are. In fact, Paul and Patricia Bragg were sort of the beginning of launching it. They called it the No Breakfast Plan. So it wasn't called, it wasn't called intermittent fasting when they launched it in the 60s, but it was the exact same program, which is about giving the gut a rest. And I teach people that they can do this in a modified version, which means they might have some bone broth in the evening later on. If they're up late, they might have a protein smoothie. They might have a smoothie in the morning so that their blood sugar is stable. They might have some bone broth or some vegetable juice in the morning, even if it's not as classic, because the truth is, rigidity, as a mom, one thing we know is nothing is rigid. Anything we're talking about, if anybody out there wants to try it, there's many ways to do it that work for you. It's not just like black or white. There's many ways to modify things that make them work better. And I'm always in favor of that. I'm really finding huge protein deficiencies in my community. And I will say I have seen that from day one. Just took me a minute to recognize it. So protein is really important and digestible, whether we're digesting it or not, it is really important. So, we need really 50 to 100 grams of protein a day. Protein is really important for kids. One of the reasons I created, my protein powders, because as you know, it's hard to get a little kid to always eat what's on their plate, but that you can almost always get them to do a smoothie or a protein drink. And
absolutely,
that is why I created them, and blood sugar is super important, and that's very protein related. So digestible protein and getting enough protein, I've really found a big shift in getting enough protein, getting enough greens. And then as we know, wheat has degenerated. So everybody is now gluten sensitive, even if they're not actually gluten allergic, because our wheat has 100 times more gluten in it than our great grandparents' wheat. It's just all gluey and it sticks to our insides. It's GMO'd, so it's made. Anything with GMO means it's not digestible because it was created not to be digested. When I was a late teenager and I had discovered about a wheat, my wheat sensitivity, there were no gluten-free products on the market.
I can imagine.
Oh my goodness. Out there. So now there's certainly choices. However, I still, urge moms to look at labels, because just because it's gluten-free, it still might have a whole bunch of other stuff in it that you don't want.
Yeah.
And it's starting to love to put the gluten-free, sticker on there because it's another buzzword now.
Hi, listeners. I wanted to take a moment to tell you about a new podcast I've been listening to called Baby or Bust. Fertility doctor and influencer Dr. Laura Shaheen assembles medical experts and former infertility patients to guide anyone who's trying to conceive. Dr. Shaheen and her guests work together to shatter myths around fertility and miscarriages and provide emotional support for everyone's individual journey. Topics include the price for various fertility treatments, how common miscarriages really are, and what affects male infertility, as some examples. And to boot, Dr. Shaheen is a double board-certified reproductive endocrinologist, best-selling author, and professor at the University of Washington. She has spoken on a myriad of topics, including infertility in the Black community, in hopes of increasing awareness and making resources more accessible. So be sure to subscribe to Baby or Bust on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And now, back to the interview. Now let's shift gears into beauty and, what your advice is, and maybe you have some staples for every decade of our lives. In your 30s, is there something that was part of your beauty regimen that you say, like, this is something you should start at that time?
Yeah, sure. You can never really start too young, in order to just take care of our skin. It's the largest organ of our body. So I will say that because our skin is the largest organ of our body, the very best thing you can do is learn cleansing and detoxification practices, because your toxicity is going to show up on your face, on your skin, on your glow. I mean, when, I talk about someone and that you may remember her name, although, you're young. So, Mae West, which was a famous movie star. And I mean, and an incredible woman, had her own, one of the the first woman who had her own film company, wrote her own films, came from the silent film industry into the speaking film. She credited colon therapy and colon cleansing as her beauty routine. And she ate all organic food. She did not drink alcohol. Alcohol's really hard on the skin. She didn't drink coffee. Coffee is acidic. And she wrote in her autobiography all about these things, which was, unheard of in her time. In those days, in the 30s, 40s, 50s, they did not have Botox. They didn't have any of the things that people do.
Right. And they were smoking.
They were smoking, right?
Which is even worse.
Yeah. So when people say to me, what do you do for your skin? And I'm happy to tell you the details, but I will tell you it is an inside job. So what you see on my face is what I do for the inside of my body. And that is the reason that it
has this radiance to it.
Yeah. And wrinkles are caused from stress and toxicity. So, it's really an inside job. I mean, one of the dermatologists that I interview for my book, will say, I cannot inject radiance into someone's face. They have to do that themselves. And so, one of the things I'll say is you can't start detox or cleansing too soon, and you can't start paying attention to your diet too soon. Alcohol, hard on the face, it's hard on your skin. It ages. Coffee's aging. Anything that's overly acidic. And then, moisturize. I'm not a huge sunblock fan, but I do wear hats and sunglasses. And, I'm always grab a hat for being out in the sun. The sun is really good for us, and our bodies need sun. And so, I'm definitely not anti-sun, but I'd say you can never, you're never too young to put on a hat, and to, be careful about getting major sun exposure. And then you're never too young to start moisturizing. So start with moisturizing right away. And then the other thing is, I do a really simple 5-minute technique, 5-minute protocol that I talk about in my book, for morning and evening. So in the 30s, I'd say, grab that hat, start your cleansing routine, and moisturize.
Nice. And what about, in your 40s and 50s, how you maintain, that.
So now your hormones are changing. So, hormone balance. So your skin is going to depend on the balance of your hormones. So you want to make sure that those are balanced. There's many options you can take in making sure those are balanced, no matter, at what age you are. And I'm working with women with really severe hormone imbalances in their 20s and 30s. So it's like, this is not just something for women in their 40s and 50s. This is starting really earlier. That has to do with the toxicity in our environment and the level of stress that we're in. So all of that. So, hormone balance has a lot to do with it, with our skin. And then, as we get into our 40s and 50s and we're spending more time and we want to use a peel, we want to find out what kind of skin type we have. And we want to make sure that we're moisturizing. We want to make sure that we're paying much more regular attention to our skin. And it's a wonderful time to allow yourself to visit, a wonderful holistic dermatologist who really, works with the whole body as one, because after all, we're not just like a compartmentalized piece of us, right? It's all one thing. There are certain genetic issues that plastic surgery can handle. I know this from working with dermatologists, that there's certain things that they'll say, that have to do with, whether eyelids get heavy or they're, droopy underneath. And And that may be something genetic that shows up in a woman's 40s or 50s. And that, your doctor will know if that's something that can be healed naturally, or whether that can, you might want to give some attention to it, or, however you choose to do it. Because in my book and just in my life, I'm totally non-judgmental. Whatever makes a person feel good, I want to support. However, I just feel like the more that we can do to feel beautiful and glow from the inside out, then the less we are looking for anything outside that we need to do that's invasive.
Yes, absolutely. And then in your 60s, you have a course, in fact, called the Mastering Menopause Makeover.
Yeah, exactly.
So, tell us about that.
Yeah. So, I'm doing a course it's specific for women going through hormonal changes, because that shows up on our skin. And it's a time when we want to, still feel, we want to feel beautiful. Beauty we are hardwired to be attracted to beauty. So, it matters to us no matter how we feel about that. But we can redefine it, we can own it, and we can feel beautiful. America is a culture that is youth oriented. There are many cultures that are not as youth oriented as we are, but we can feel beautiful at whatever age we're in. In my 50s, I started to do some more serious peels with my dermatologist, and especially because I spent all my life out in the sun. I rode horses. I was out in the sun. I was always baking myself. I didn't really wear a hat for such a long time. So I had a lot of sun damage. So one of the ways that we dealt with that is, we did some really great, safe, natural peels. And some of those you can do at home. And I talk about those products in my book. And some of those you want to do with a professional. Great to allow yourself to visit someone like that. And that can take years off your face. And then just doing some simple daily things can take a lot of time off your face. There's some, products that I really like. For a long time, I was kind of using Dr. Bronner soap and olive oil. It took me a long time to create, a skin regimen, which I really did just because I'd had older clients who were starting to deal with skin cancer. And that was like, okay, I need to do something. I need to learn how to deal with that. And so, a lot of what I did was to protect myself around that. And of course, the side effect was eliminating lines and wrinkles, which is, who doesn't want that?
I feel like if we can avoid the nipping and the tucking and the going under the neck.
I haven't had anything, like that. I don't ever plan to. But if anybody does, I think, like I said, I want anybody to do what makes them feel comfortable. And, there's enough judgment in the world, and mostly from ourselves. So, I don't need to add anything to that. However, I do know that once we cut, we're dealing with trauma in the skin, and, what might look amazing in the first 6 months or year may not look that amazing a few years later, because now you're dealing with damaged skin. I remember when I was in my 40s seeing a friend who just had a pretty serious facelift and a lot of work. And when I saw her after the swelling went down, I have to admit, she looked amazing. And part of me is like, wow, okay, 2 years later, she looked 20 years older.
Oh, no.
What happened is her skin had been so damaged by all that invasive work that all of a sudden it was like she left Shangri-La. It's incredible what cleansing and detox will do for our skin, from whether you're a teenager or whether you're in their late 60s, like I am, in their 70s. I have women in their 70s and 80s that hardly have any wrinkles, and they just are radiant. And, that's really what we all want. And not only that, that means when you're that age and you look radiant, that's also a sign of strength and health, and also mental well-being, because we're wearing our life on our face, and we want to have a life that we love, but we also feel like we want to feel beautiful, we want to feel attractive. And I will say it's absolutely possible to do that without spending hours, because none of us have that. I have a 5-minute routine, and I don't have time to spend more than that.
I'd love to learn more about your motherhood journey. Did you always know you wanted to become a mother?
I did. I always wanted to be a mom, which is kind of crazy because doctors told me not only that I wouldn't live, but that if, I would never have kids. And I did have 4 miscarriages. So I had a very challenging road to motherhood. And as everything that happened to my body seems to lead to another healing for me and another growth and another whole bag of tricks to learn, I found an incredible woman to study with, Naravi Payne, who was one of the founders of the whole mind-body understanding of fertility. So in working with her, I learned that there was some psychological traumas that had led to my infertility. I mean, she'd helped 5,000 women have babies without use of any medication, hormones, or anything.
Incredible.
Yeah, incredible. So, that was, and when I started to work with her, within 3 months, I was pregnant with my son. So what I really learned the mind-body connection in infertility and also what stress does. And I talk about that journey in my book as well, that stress component and how that internalized stress was affecting me, stress below my level of consciousness. And in just a short time, I learned how to shift that so that my body, instead of being like a cauldron of acid that I wasn't even aware of, could shift to being an environment that could host and hold, carry a child. And, and I had 2 healthy kids and became certified in her method. So yeah, being a mom was something I always wanted. And I mean, it's every single second of it has been more than I thought it could be. My kids are 24 and 28. And
wow.
I was open to becoming a mom in any form. Like if I couldn't have had kids, it was like, however I'm going to get to do this. It was incredible to learn, what was possible and then how much the mind affected it and how much I could learn in ways of just reducing the symptoms of the stress and trauma that I'd experienced. And then being able to help other moms do the same thing. Now, her techniques are more popular. And so for moms out there who are struggling with fertility, there's lots of methods now that can support you, even if also you're combining that with IVF or, other forms of support.
Tell us about a mom sense moment you had. And by that, mom sense is a phrase I coined for our built-in sixth sense.
And each child is different. So it's like I would know that, one child needed to be soothed in one certain way and another child would need to be soothed in another way. One of my kids, I would definitely have rules for her that the other child didn't need to have something just laid down like that. But I knew that, for one of my kids, it's just, if it wasn't going to be like that, then it was like as if I hadn't even said it. And I just, I had to trust that. And I also had to kind of just let go of caring what anybody thought about my parenting and just do exactly what I felt was the right thing. I think their dad knew that. It was like when it came to the kids, it was like, this is how it was going to go. After things started working, like, oh, wow, I can see that this is really, I can see who the kids are and who they're becoming. And so there was a trust factor in my mom sense. I remember breastfeeding my daughter at my son's preschool. And, and I had her when I was almost 43. So one of the younger moms said to me, wow, how do you have the courage to not just go in the bathroom and lock the door and do that? And this is a group of just all moms, right? So, right. And I said, I'm old. Nobody's going to tell me where to breastfeed. Not to breastfeed my child. And she's like, oh, okay, I could do that. And I said, this is just a group of moms sitting around watching our kids at preschool. So, I don't need to go in a place that's not clean and breastfeed her. And it was just like, and I could see the look in her eye was like, oh, something shifted.
Yes, exactly.
Isn't that what we moms do for each other?
Yep.
We create that safe community for each other and we give each other that kind of feedback. My mom friends are my closest friends.
And where can my listeners find you and your products, which there's a plethora. I love it.
Thank you. Yeah. I created a product line of products for sensitive people, and which is everyone now, and online courses as well. So I'm at julialoggins.com. It's simple.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Julia, and sharing your light and knowledge on all things gut and inner beauty that manifests into outer beauty and how to age with grace.
Thank you so much for having me.
Isn't Julia amazing? Julia, thank you so much for joining me on my show and helping me on my wellness journey. It has been so difficult to feel like I'm getting back to my optimum health after having my 3 kids, and you are helping me do it. And we're starting from the gut. You know, Mom Sense is all about trusting your gut instinct, and taking care of your gut is equally important. So thank you for helping me through it all. Julia has so graciously created an exclusive promo code for all of you listening. It's MomSense, and you can use it on her website. So just log on to julialoggins.com, and then you get 10% off your order. So that applies to her courses and her supplements. I especially love the enzyme energy pill, magnesium energy, and D energy. And there's another supplement that I'm taking called Crave Control that's helping kind of curb my cravings. And I take that with every meal too. So love her products, and really happy to endorse them because they're working for me. Be sure to rate and review, and of course, subscribe to That's Total Mom Sense wherever you listen. You can log on to my specific landing page to do so. It's that'stotalmomsense.com/iTunes, and follow me on Instagram. That's where I post the most. And my handle is @KanikaChaddagupta. Remember, always trust your mom sense and your dad sense. Stay strong, super parents. I'll see you next time.
That's Total Mom Sense.